Hello, everybody. My name is Wesley Faulkner. I'm the co-host of this new podcast. Happy 2024. And this is season 3 of the Radical Respect podcast. And
With Wesley is me, Kim Scott. And some of you may be here for the Just Work podcast. Don't worry, you are in the right place. Inspired by Wesley Faulkner and also Ernest Adams, I did a radical rewrite of the book Just Work. And the result is that the paperback, which is going to be called Radical Respect, will come out in May of this year. So from now on, it's Radical Respect all the time. And with us today is Tyler Chou. Tyler has been in Hollywood for many, many years. And right now she is the creator's attorney on YouTube. So tell us a little bit about what that means, the creator's attorney on YouTube. Tyler.
Hi, Kim and Wesley. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. So the creator's attorney is someone who protects creators on YouTube. I really focus on YouTube because I really think that's the new Hollywood, basically. If you have a story and you want to put it out, you don't have to wait for a studio ahead to tell you that your story is worthy of being told, right? You can just write the story, turn on your camera, and put it up in, 2 days. And so I saw a need for creators not having enough protection. They basically sign anything that's put in front of them. And a lot of these creators with huge channels are young. They're 18, they're 20. Some have not been to college. Some have never had a corporate job. So I saw a huge problem and a need for creators to have an attorney to protect them.
That's amazing. And you're also the CEO of Tyler Chou Law for Creators. Which is a law firm focused also on protecting them. And you have a new business and podcast that you're launching soon called The Creator Entrepreneur, where you're going to support creators who are making 6 figures from AdSense, a program near and dear to my heart. We can talk about that later. And brand deals that take them from 7 to 9 figure exits. That is very exciting. That's super cool. And before that, you were a Hollywood attorney at places like Disney. So you've done a ton of cool things. And you also have a YouTube channel. Can you tell us a little bit about the YouTube channel?
So I started my YouTube channel in October of 2022. I kind of had a midlife crisis and I decided I wanted to do something creative. My dream was to be a novelist, but as an immigrant, I went to Berkeley as an English major. But I decided to go to law school to take care of my parents and my younger siblings. And I wanted to be a DA. So I had a midlife crisis, decided I wanted to do something creative, and decided to undertake the hardest thing ever, which is starting a YouTube channel, because to grow on YouTube is almost near impossible. Yeah. So I had a friend who told me, you should take these kind of trending news stories. And at the time, there was a story about the Try Guys who were at BuzzFeed. And I had worked at BuzzFeed. I was head of the creators program there. And they had this huge drama about one of the partners, one of the co-founders, basically having an affair with an employee. And it became a whole thing, right? And people were like, well, what does this mean in terms of Me Too? Is she a victim? Is she, and so I jumped in, I did a video, and it got like 200,000 views. And I had that was my 3rd video. I had maybe 200 subscribers at that point. So I did 2 more follow-ups. SNL did a Try Guys video. It was very tone deaf, basically making fun of them. I don't know if you guys remember seeing that. But those 3 videos took me to 10,000 subs. And so from there on, I made a video every week. And I am currently at about 30,000 subs with the last story of SS Sniper Wolf doxing Jack's Films. And, that video has just hit 400,000 views. So it's been such a dream come true for me to be able to tell my story and be a storyteller on video on YouTube.
So your novelist aspirations are coming true, just in a different medium.
Yes, I definitely have that novel within me at some point. I think it'll probably be called The Hollywood Attorneys turned Creator's Attorney.
Yeah. I love it. So what I thought we would do next is read a brief excerpt from Radical Respect. And Tyler, I'd love to get your feedback on it. And Wesley, as always, I'm relying on your candor. And so we'll talk about it for a few minutes. And then, Tyler, I know you have a million great stories. So we'll choose a couple of them and dig in. How's that sound?
Amazing.
Yeah, let's do it. Great.
All right, here we go. So, by the way, towards the end of episode 2, we started talking about bullying and a special form of bullying called bloviating BS. And bloviating BS, for those of you who may not remember, is basically when someone kind of charges into a room and takes up all the oxygen and starts making stuff up, and somehow they get away with it. So here's the excerpt. People who are from systemically advantaged groups or dominant in some way are much more likely to get away with or even be rewarded for bloviating BS. In a fascinating study, researchers asked men and women whether they were expert in 16 distinct math topics, 3 of which were made up. Men were much more likely to claim expertise in these made-up topics than women, as were the rich over the middle class. What's more, people were more likely to challenge BS from those they perceived as their equals than from people with more power. So if you're a leader, you need to make sure you're creating the conditions for people to call BS on you. Not getting called out on one's BS breeds problematic overconfidence that harms collaboration. This can work in the BSer's favor in situations such as job interviews and grant applications. But that means if you let it influence your decisions as a leader, you're hiring the BSer, not the expert, giving the grant to the BSer, not to the expert. Allowing the BSer to hog airtime in a meeting means your decisions will be unduly influenced by a person who knows less than the others in the room. That's why it's your job as a leader to address it. Not only does allowing bloviating BS to be rewarded harm decision making, it's also unfair to people because people who are systemically disadvantaged can rarely get away with bloviating BS, and so don't reap its rewards. The answer, though, is not to ensure that everyone gets rewarded for bloviation. The answer is to make sure no one does. There are some privileges that people from systemically advantaged groups have that should be extended to everyone, and others that should be extended to no one. As a leader, it's your job to make sure that no one person dominates, especially not a BSer, and that everyone feels comfortable participating in meetings online or off, and also in the everyday back and forth of conversations at work. All right, so lay it on me, Tyler. What does this make you think of?
Well, having worked in Hollywood the last 16 years, I have been around a lot of BSers, whether they be my bosses or just simply executives on films, right? It's sort of a broken system because no one will take responsibility, right? When a film fails, it's marketing, right? How many CMOs get fired in Hollywood all the time, every time a big film fails, right? And so I have been really surrounded by that. And in many ways, gaslit many times, before it was like a term that I understood it to be today. And constantly asking myself, like, so they're saying this truth or their truth, right? But I don't think that's true. But because I'm their junior, or having grown up as an Asian woman, like I have there's a stereotype that I shouldn't speak up, right? And so the times I have spoken up, has not served me that well, and so I've been around a lot of BSers, but like you, Kim, that you mentioned in your book, a lot of women or victims just kind of stay quiet because sometimes we don't know what to say. And your book has been so helpful because now I know what to say, but now, I'm not really in Hollywood anymore. But I can teach my clients what to say, when they're victims or when they're in a circumstance where they're surrounded by BSers, because a lot of YouTubers are also BSers in that sense.
Yes. Yes. In fact, the internet is rather full of it, and it's going to get more full with AI, which is the bloviating bullshitter to end all bloviating bullshitters. What about you,
Yes.
Wesley?
I was funny. Yes, I was thinking about some coworkers and also like even my kids when it really depends on the mindset going into a situation that kind of helps with determining how one reacts. When
Mm-hmm.
I'm in an argument with my kids, they'll pick apart every little thing I say because they want to prove me wrong and show that they're right. And same thing with any coworkers who just really, for some reason, find fault in everything I was saying. But if it's also like if you go to a comedy club and someone steps on the stage and says, "How's everyone doing?" and everyone goes, "Woo!" But if
Yeah.
they said the same thing when you go to a doctor's waiting room and say, "How's everyone doing?" I mean, you'll get a different reaction. So the
Yes.
mood sets the context, and I think what you're a little bit of what you're illuminating, if those who are in, let's say, the majority,
Mm-hmm.
I think the crowd wants to find the thing to attach to and the thing to find is valid in what they're saying. But if there's a person from a marginalized background where their resume might be put in question, their history might be put in question, their ability might be put in question, I think it switches. And I think people find a thing to find fault in what they're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I hear the bloviating, but it also does really matter who's the bloviator, because what
Yes.
is the default is to find something that is valid in what they're saying. But if you reverse it to someone who is maybe from a marginalized community or someone who's not in the majority, that it might be the other way around, where the bloviator, where people find everything that is not true and be able to point it out. For instance, I was in a call when someone says, every time I do this, people show up. And if you say every time, or if you use these
Yes.
justifications, it shows is that some confidence. And then I was reading back something that I wrote, and I had to like do a control F and find every time I say, I think, I think, because
Yeah.
I know enough to know to like kind of like hedge my bet that I don't know everything and then to leave, but it makes me feel or sound less confident. And so I think in some ways that I just did it there, that people do really gravitate to that um, feeling of bloviating to some
Yeah.
regards, and it
Yeah,
pays off.
because it is often rewarded,
Hmm.
and it's also punished, I think, sometimes as well, if you're not in some way, shape, or form in the dominant role in the
Yeah,
room.
yeah,
And with
absolutely.
your kids, I'm really interested in what you said, because I guess you're the dominant one in that relate,
Hmm.
or could be, but you've somehow found a way to lay your power down so that they feel free to challenge you, which is good. It's good parenting right there.
I try.
Uh,
What do they
so,
say?
so there,
Difficult kids make great adults.
yes. Well, and they also make great parents, difficult kids, because they're challenging you, and that's a good thing. And nobody's
Yeah.
watching you closer.
So true.
So Tracy, other thoughts on this excerpt from you? What is this conversation bringing up for you?
Um, just as I was preparing, kind of mentally for our conversation, I kind of took, a trip down memory lane of 16 years in Hollywood, and I realized that, in the context of reading your book too, like how bad my bosses were. Like
Yeah.
I didn't really think, like, I haven't sat around crying, thinking, oh my God, my life's been so bad. But like in the context of how you have described, people, leaders who don't kind of step up, or bystanders who don't become upstanders, right? I'm realizing, like, they talk about nepotism in Hollywood, right? And that's really a thing, right? And people who are confident, as you guys are talking, being a parent, when you're confident, it's kind of like the Jedi mind trick, right? Like when you're like really confident and you act like you should be there, people
Yeah.
don't question you, right? So I had a boss who basically had no entertainment experience, but he married, the he married someone whose father is the godfather of all talent lawyers in Hollywood. And so the CEO of this company needed a president of his company. And so he turned to his attorney and said, who do you have? And he's like, well, how about my son-in-law, who is an attorney but has no entertainment experience. And so I was there for 3 years, basically, in many ways, like kind of teaching him how films are made. I mean, he knew like a little bit, but not a lot. But the problem with that is when you have a boss who knows less than you, they're always questioning you, right? Because they're like, wait, but is this right? Are you sure? And I've been, I had at that point been, had already been at Disney. I've done, probably 10 or 12 feature films at that point, big $200 million budget films. And I constantly had to justify myself, even though I knew I was right, but he was but he was the president. And he was my boss. And so he could BS his way through any conversation. And I had that sense of being gaslit a lot, right? Like that I was wrong somehow simply. And I also, every job I've had, I think I can't remember a job where I was not the only Asian or minority. Like every like my last job, private equity, all white men. At that job, all white men. So it's just like, it's like, and the white men are very comfortable, like you said in your example, right? You make up a math theory and they're like, oh, we're an expert in it, even though it doesn't exist, right? Like they're so comfortable doing that. And I've seen it happen in front of me during my career. And I'm like, but I could never do that. I could never do that, because I am so truthful. And that to me, I could I guess after hearing you read it, I'm like, why can't I be a BSer a little more? But but that's not who I am.
You don't
right?
want to. You don't want to become a BSer.
But I've seen people do it, and it doesn't build morale, right? It doesn't build a good culture. People are not. They're like, what's the point? Like, why am I showing up and telling the truth if is what gets rewarded? I've seen that a lot in my career.
Yeah. And I guess I probably, of the three of us, I probably am guiltiest of bloviating BS because I'm most likely not to get punished for it. I'm guessing, but I don't know what you all think. Like, I remember the first time. Go ahead, Wesley.
I was going to say, I think the consequences, just like people are looking for the good, when they find the fault in those that they're looking for, it just doesn't go away. And so the punishment just lingers and says, oh, you remember that time Wesley made that up, though? Can we really be trusted in this third thing 5 years ago, from that incident? But someone who is caught, they're like, oh, I was just, going through that. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. And there's more what do you call it? Empathy for people. It's like, oh yeah, I've been in that situation. It's okay. That's fine. And it gets blown off and it doesn't really linger and stick to people. I mean, I think we can look at politics today and see a lot of examples.
Yes, you can notice or take a look at anyway, I'm not going to go down a particular path that I was going to go down, but yes. And I mean, my husband is a white man and he can get away with it more than I can, but I can get away with it more than I should. And the thing is, it makes me feel dirty when I do it. And so I try hard not to do it. But yeah, it's a real problem because it's so
also
much
socially awkward to point it out when you do see it. I've been in on panel discussions, I'm sure you have too, where you hear someone BSing, you're like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't
You're just making that up.
Yeah. And I can't, it feels awkward to call that person out when you're on the same panel, or if you're in a boardroom, or if you're in a meeting. And so my default is like, I want to say something, but I must stay silent in order for it not to be an awkward situation and derailing the whole thing. So the consequence for someone to call someone out on their BS is really, really high as well.
It can, yes, it absolutely can be. I mean, I would say I also, like, I remember there was one person who I worked with when I was at Google who was just like, every time I say the word bloviating BS, his face springs into my mind. And I remember I got back from maternity leave and I was generally the one who pointed out what he was saying. Just Like, it just made no sense. And so I had been gone, and I had a 7-month, I was on bed rest and then on maternity leave. So I'd been out for quite some time, and I got back and I was in a meeting with him, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what? And I finally said, but this makes no sense. What you're saying makes no sense because this, and this, and it, like, and then he backed down, and everybody's like, oh, thank God she's back. I'm like, why do I have to? But maybe that's the job of the white woman. Maybe it was easier for me than anyone else to point it out.
Yeah. You have to be
Who
really,
knows?
really like anchored in your ability to keep your job in order to say that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's psychological safety or if it's just tenure or
Privilege. It's
privilege.
privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just came from meeting today where there was a question saying, how is management doing? Vote yes or no. I'm like, how am I? There's only one right answer, right?
Yeah. It's so good. All right.
I
So
do agree with you, Wesley. Just about, I think most people are afraid to speak up, and because they're like, well, will this jeopardize my job? You know, what will I seem? You know, and as a woman, right, it's always like, oh, well, women who speak up are bitchy, right, or
Yeah.
they're aggressive, whereas a man is just, oh, they're just stating a fact, you know, and so I've definitely experienced that myself, having kept quiet many a times because my boss would say something in a room and I just wouldn't say anything. So
Yeah. I've
yeah.
kept quiet a lot, often as well. I mean, that was kind of what prompted me to write Radical Respect, was like, okay, you know, what do I have to lose now? And, it's one of the benefits of being 56, I guess.
Well, Kim, you know that the beginning of your book is really, really powerful. I mean, just you know, it gives women a sense of being seen in so many ways. Like that was, um, I just was so touched by it, and I really applaud you for writing about your experiences at the start of your career, because I think so many women who will read that and say, oh, I need to speak up. And I do think the younger generation, they have a lot less tolerance for the kind of treatment that I think maybe you and I let
Yeah.
ourselves, stay quiet about.
Yeah. But even young women I talk to, they're like, is there any point? It's hard. It's really hard to speak up. And it's harder when you're younger. And that was kind of part of the reason why I wrote this book now and probably not 20 years ago, was that it's safer for me to do it now than it was 20 years ago. So I hope that it encourages people to speak up, speak out, or even just to notice for their own.
Yes.
Like a lot of the stuff I wrote about, I did not at the time fully understand what was happening because it was too hard to understand when I was going through it. It's easier to understand it and looking back than in the moment.
Yes.
In some ways,
So
it makes it harder to go forward because now you have the tools to recognize it and you see it,
yeah,
and so now you can't ignore it. But yes, you're transitioning over to the stories. I think it sounds like we're both doing it.
yes. So you got a story for us, Tyler, you want to talk about?
Um, well, I want to, I think, juxtapose my past with my future, right? I think
Yes.
looking back at my career, I think, wow, I've had really some awful situations. I mean, there was one job where I was basically, I was on maternity leave, and they fired my assistant, right? And then I was like, that's weird. What's going on? And then they indicated that they were going to lay me off, right?
Oh my
And
gosh.
of course, as an attorney, I'm like, this is, and then they had hired a man already, like while I was gone on maternity. And
Oh my
he was like,
gosh.
he was basically there to replace me, but they were like, oh no, he's not here to replace you. He's just going to support, you guys will be a team now, because I had been on my own doing the job of like 3 attorneys. And then I was like, something's not right here. So I, reached out to attorneys and employment attorneys, and asked
Mhm.
them, like, is this kosher? Is this okay? And they're like, no, this is not.
Yeah,
So
not
I fought
okay.
them. And it was the first time in my career that I fought. And now I still, I left, right? And it was a fight. And by the time everything was concluded, I was already at another job. But while we were in this settlement, they had the arbitrator come in and just scream. And my attorneys are two women, right? And we were in the room, and he's like, "You're never gonna work in this town again."
Oh my
Right?
God.
And I was already at another company by that point,
Yeah,
right?
you were already working in that
right.
town.
I was already working at another company at this point. And I was like, I'm so confused right now. Why do you feel the need to come in and bully me? Like, it was the worst time of my life, Kim. Like, I was devastated. It was a company they were kind of a startup and now they're huge. And I was there from the beginning, and I kind of questioned, like, oh, what was I a good attorney? It was a job I asked for a review all the time. And Hollywood companies are notorious for not giving reviews. They don't know how to give reviews. So they're like, you're doing great. That was the review I got 3 years in a row. You're doing amazing. You can't, like, we're so grateful to you. And then when they laid me off, they're like, oh, you're not doing good work. And I'm like, but wait,
what?
Like, my reviews all said I was doing good work.
Yeah.
So it was gaslighting to like the nth degree, right? And so and looking back, and I've had abusive women bosses. My women bosses have actually been tougher than my male bosses. And I don't know what that's about, right? I don't know if it's because they were treated that way and they felt like, oh, I'm going to toughen you up as a female attorney, or, I went through it, so you should too as well. And just, I think, but I'm so grateful to the last 16 years, right? Because had I not gone through all of that, I wouldn't be able to really enjoy and understand how happy I am right now with my own law firm. Now, the irony is not lost on me, right? That I had to go start my own company, just like you did with Juice, right? Like, you're like, I'm just going to go start my own company so I can create the kind of culture and company that I've always dreamed about. And so there's that for me too. I mean, I'm in the process of hiring an assistant and a couple of junior attorneys. And so, 4 months in, this is incredible. My firm has had explosive growth because I think there just aren't enough attorneys protecting creators. And there's a huge market. I mean, Goldman Sachs says that the creator economy will be at $490 billion in about 3 years.
Wow.
Right? I mean, and the fact that, like, I'm like one of just there's maybe one other attorney who does what I do. She's at a big law firm, but it's just wild to me, right? That such a huge industry, there aren't attorneys dedicated to this space. So going back to, I think having gone through the dark machine that is Hollywood, I'm now able to understand, what it is to work with people that I want to work with. Now I get to choose my clients, and I'm making meaningful changes in their lives, right? I can tell them, hey, by the way, your YouTube channel is not your business. That's the marketing arm of your business. You're actually the business. You're the media company, right? You're the actor, the writer, the producer, the director, the distributor. You have all of this power. And we have all of these mini, media companies and accidental entrepreneurs, who are going to be, I'm willing to bet that in the next 10 years, we're going to have an Academy Award winning director who had their start in YouTube, right? It's just like, so, and I love, imagine a generation of kids, right, who create for the beauty of creating, right? They don't have to go take a soul-sucking corporate job because they were told by society they should do it. They just create and they put out their stories, and they don't have to self-numb with alcohol or drugs. They just love what they get to do, and they do. So many of my clients love being able to put out videos educating people. A lot of my clients are professionals who are also have educational channels, and they're engineers or career coaches or finance people. And these are the people who are sharing their expertise with the world. I mean, how many times have your like dishwasher broken and you're like, I'm going to go YouTube it, right? Like YouTube is the place to get education. And I really am so hopeful for the future, right? That we're about to have this industry that didn't exist 10 years ago, right? That's really going to be a huge industry. And all the companies that are cropping up behind it, right? Like, you have, all the editors and all the agencies and, and potential investors. I've been a
And
lot of,
lawyers.
and lawyers and fractional CEO. A lot of my work is kind of like fractional CEO. How do we grow your operations, right? Like, how do we grow your business? And that I love the most, right? Like, kind of helping them world build, like, okay, now you have this accidental business. Now let's build some courses. Let's build some products. I just helped a client launch a 6-figure course that he sold out in 3 days. 3 days,
Wow.
6 figures,
Wow.
right? It's like, that's the creators have so much power because people want to buy from people, right? You look at Mr. Beast, Feastables, Prime Hydration, Emma Chamberlain Coffee, Skims. These are all billion-dollar companies built by creators, kids.
It's amazing.
Basically. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So you mentioned that you're bringing on clients, of course. You also are going to be hiring some junior attorneys and an assistant. How do you have a framework where you are choosing who you're going to bring on based on how you would like to be treated and how you'd like to work with someone? Do you have one for internally for the people that day to day you'll be working with, or do you have two different frameworks? How do you juggle, like, to make sure that you are having some of the type of relationships that, and not recreating some of the things that you have seen as kind of abusive in your own work
That's a
environment?
great question. As you were talking, I realized that when I have hired junior lawyers or assistants in the past, I tend to give kind of the working class kids more of a chance, if that makes any sense, right? Like, and my assistant when I was at Skydance was kind of that, right? He was really hardworking. He was an assistant an attorney who was at ICM and was training to be an assistant. An agent, and then an agent threw a stapler at his head and like grazed his head. And he's like, okay, I do not want to be an agent. So I took him on, even though he had no attorney experience, because he was really hardworking. And I think attitude and I know like just putting your head down, doing hard work is not enough, but like having a good attitude about it, not coming from privilege. Now, unfortunately, am I being like reverse prejudice? Like, do you know what I mean? When I hear of someone coming from privilege, I do hesitate a little bit. And I will tell you why, because in my last job, I caught myself doing that. So in my last job at the private equity firm, I hired somebody from privilege. And I do regret it because he said no to me so many times. I would ask him to do something and he would say no. Like, first of all, in Hollywood, you don't do that. But I was like, it wasn't overbearing. I mean, I'm such a good boss. Like, I would bring him coffee every day. Like, I always asked about him. He wanted to be a writer and a comedian. So I gave him this chance. And he would just say no to me. I was like, can you go into this document, do alt find, and just find this one phrase for me, as I was running out for a lunch because I needed this information for a call I was going to do in the car. And he's like, no, I don't have time right now. And I'm like, wait, what? I just need you to do one simple thing for me. So look, these are two like instances. Like, does it mean I should always hire, kids, or people, not kids, I'm sorry, young attorneys who don't come from privilege? I don't know. That's like, I mean, Kim, you know what I wanted to say to you was, you're very hard on yourself in the book, but it has made me think about, like looking at myself, like, even when I'm doing things that I think is like good, right? Like hiring people who don't come from privilege, but am I then excluding the people? But I don't think I am. I look at everybody and then I see like if it's a good connection or not, if they're going to be a good fit, if they want this enough. I think what I will be looking for, Wesley, as I'm hiring is like, do you want to be a part of the creator economy and the creator space? Because here's the difference. It's not all roses and posies. Like, creators are very, they're a lot of work. I have to spend a lot of work professionalizing them, explaining to them why they need an attorney. Why do you need contracts in place? Like, you would be horrified to know how many of these creators have editors or people they're giving revenue to or partners that they don't have anything in writing. And I'm like, why? are these things not in writing? And they're like, well, why does it need to be? Because they think it's fine, right? Because they're like, it's the honeymoon stage. They haven't been through litigation. They haven't seen things fall apart. They haven't, gone through where they have to hire and fire people. But they are now. Like I have one client who are like, yeah, I just fired somebody. God, I wish I had a contract in place because like, I need a non-compete. And I'm like, yes, I wanted you to have that in place. But now we will. The next editor she hires will be under contract. So
yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that what you want is kind of it's what you do for your living is making the implicit explicit. If this is a partnership, let's put it in writing that this is a partnership.
Yes.
If this is agreement, let's put it in writing. And it's the same when you try to bring in people, that there is an exchange that is kind of beneficial for both people. You'll learn a lot about the business, but you'll do some work for me. And you don't want someone. It's great to have personal boundaries. I'm not going to be against that, but for work boundaries of saying something like I'm going to take care of me and me alone makes it so that the person is not looking out for you like you're looking out for them in your work environment. So if you say, hey, I just need you to look something up for a few minutes, and they're like, no, I don't have time, then it's more like that's a very me statement instead of thinking about as a whole. So I see like a good balance between the two, where your work environment, where it's explicit, I pay you, you do the work, where you need some of that give and take, but also when you're working with your creators, there's give and take, but now we need to make it explicit, which is really just trying to bridging those two worlds. It sounds like a really good like balance.
I think also the wonderful thing about the law is that it does make the bloviating a little harder. If you put it down in writing, like you can't get away with, well, what I thought was and what you thought. It forces commitments and communication in a way that I think is very healthy.
I'm very much. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say you can have your last comment, but we're running out of time, so I just want to quickly understand if people do want to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
Oh, thank you so much, Wesley. So they can go to my website, which is tylerchoulaw.com. Chou is CHOU, and on YouTube or on Instagram, it's Tyler Chou, the creator's attorney. And people can reach out to me. I'm deeply passionate about protecting creators. So I give out a lot of free calls. My husband at the beginning would joke, are you going to start, like charging for some of your time? But I was just so happy and passionate to be doing and making a difference that I didn't in the beginning. Now I am. And I'm really, really excited and passionate about making this, my law firm and my company a good place to work, right? I almost wanted for all the people who didn't have the bosses or the workplaces that they were hoping for, I want to create that for them. And I care very deeply about people, maybe sometimes too much. And helping creators create a sustainable business and monetize, right? Not just be burned out by making content every day. They've grown now. Like, how do we take you to the next level? So I'm very, very optimistic about the future. And I'm so, so grateful that you guys had me on. So thank you, Kim and Wesley.
Thank you for your time. And Kim, do you want to take us out?
Yes, and I just want to say thank you again, Tyler, for what you're doing. When I was leading the AdSense team at Google, we said we were funding creativity a nickel at a time. So you're helping make that. It didn't exactly work out that way, but I think you're helping make that ideal more of a reality than it often is. And to all of you all listening, if you want to reach out to us, send us a note at hello@justworktogether.com. We're going to change that soon, but for now it's hello@justworktogether.com. We'd love to hear your stories, your thoughts, what you have done in your career to overcome bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, harassment, and physical violations. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.